Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024-2025 Elite TR Divisional Technical Meeting. We'll start with just outlining or naming our regional coordinators. For Region 31, we've got Amy, Claire, Paul, Mary, Christine, David, and Heather. And for Region 32, Adrian, Hannah, Catherine, Pete, Matt, and Brian Solomon. That's myself. For the event, the head judging officials, or HJOs, will be Brian Solomon, who will be the jury president, or JP. Catherine Richards and Paul Graff will be the USEC judges, and Kevin Osgood, the aspirant USEC judge. The event organizer and head scorekeeper is Adrian Bochop, who's also our divisional coordinator. The volunteer coordinator is Hannah Morita. The isolation coordinators for Sunday will be Matt and Pete. The head belayer is Priscilla Baker, who is from Mesa Rim, as well as the head route setter, Enrico, who's also from Mesa Rim. We can start with some general information for competitors. To help us with a smooth check-in, we're asking everybody to have their waivers completed before getting there. To also make sure you look at the info sheet with some of the maps are on there, and we'll have some of the pictures of those maps here as well, and know where you're going. Make sure you bring everything you need, your snacks, your equipment, and also make sure you don't enter the gym until your designated check-in time. So if you're in session 2, you don't show up for session 1 and enter the gym. For our lead climbers, you'll need to bring your own rope. Your rope will have to be a minimum of 35 meters and it has to be between a 9.5 or a 10.1. Also, please make sure you have like a rope bag or something like that. That's going to help you manage your rope and make sure it's flaked before you get to your climbs. That's going to help the belayers hook you up and get you on the wall as quickly as possible. On Saturday, the format will be flash format. So this is 2 routes for each category, minimum 50-minute rest between each route. You're going to have 6 minutes for each route, 1 attempt for each route as well. You'll have a time for each route where you're supposed to be there. You won't start that climb earlier than that time. However, you could start after that time. So if your time is 10 a.m., for example, make sure you're at your climb and you make sure you know it's either climb 1 or 2 at 10 a.m. It's very likely that you could be climbing or be put on the wall right at 10 a.m., or maybe you wait a couple minutes longer. If you're not there by your designated time, we'll wait till the next climber's time, and then we'll start that climber on the wall. And once you miss your climb, one of your climbs in the qualifying day, it does not mean you can't do your other climb. You can still climb your second climb. However, your first climb means that you get the lowest score out of everybody there. So please don't miss your score. Don't miss your times. Also, for athletes, make sure you keep your bibs for day 2, especially for those who are going to be going to finals. The bibs count as your spectator tickets as well. So if you're in session 1, you want to watch session 2, you need your bib as a spectator. Otherwise, you're going to be paying that spectator fee to enter again in the afternoon. And your bibs for day 2 will also count as spectator tickets. Now for Sunday, that's going to be isolation. That's the format for finals. You're going to have 1 route, the top 13 people from qualifiers, not counting extra advancements. Pardon me, there are no extra advancements for qualifiers. Top 13 will go to finals. And then everybody will have a viewing period where you come out, you look at the route as a category, and then you go back into isolation, and then you get 1 attempt on that route. And we'll bring 1 climber out at a time. You'll have 6 minutes on that route. And same thing for both Saturday and Sunday. Once you're hooked up and the judges give the thumbs up for you to start climbing, you're going to have 40 seconds to get on the wall. If you don't get on the wall within the 40 seconds, we're going to hurry you up to get you on the wall. If still you're taking longer and you're not getting on the wall, we're going to enter the area of giving you a verbal warning or even a yellow card if you still don't take longer than needed to get on the wall. Now for Sunday, we're going to have an isolation. This is ISO format, so that means at some point There's going to be a window where our athletes will check in at the back of the gym and they'll go into the isolation to get ready for their finals. Please don't miss that window. Okay, there'll be no exceptions for allowing anybody into isolation late. If you're there and you're a minute late, we cannot make an exception. If you're on the road and there's some unforeseen circumstances, I highly recommend you call us and let us know in advance. But I also want to say this does not mean that you're going to be going to ISO when you get there late, but it could help your case. We will take that into consideration, and we will consult with USA Climbing. And if everything is kosher, then yes, you could go into ISO. However, at this point, I'm almost 100% sure if you're late for ISO, you're not going to be going in there. Bring everything you need into ISO, your gear, your food, your drinks, your snacks, your books, whatever you want, because there'll be no deliveries into ISO. Once you're there, you're there. You're not allowed to have any of those connective devices, your iPhones, iPods, AirPods, anything that's Bluetooth. You'd need a waiver from USA Climbing if you're taking something that is a necessity for you. So you're going to have to check those in before going to ISO or leaving with your family or friends as you enter ISO. Once you leave ISO for your attempt, bring all your stuff with you. Because if you leave it in ISO, you're not going to be able to get it back until everybody's done climbing in finals. Now, let's look at the maps really quickly. The big map shows where the check-ins are. The yellow is where the athletes are, so that's around the back. It is very likely you could be passing the front doors as you go there, so please don't peek in there. If we see you peeking in, we're going to note it. For volunteers, you're going to be checking into the blue arrow that's the front of the gym. You're going to be sure they're going to check for your waivers. So if you have not done a waiver, make sure you've done one. If you haven't been in Mesa for the last year or one of the Mesa rims, you're going to need a new waiver because my understanding is they have a new waiver system. And anybody that hasn't been there within the last year is required to fill in a new waiver. Okay. The smaller map is showing some parking sections. So both of these maps are available on our info sheet. If you want to take a look at them closer, you should be able to take your time and study them. There's lots of street parking there. However, since this is a big event, that could fill up really quickly. There's some additional parking. The PS1, that's about 5-10 minutes away, a 5-10 minute walk from the gym. And then the additional PS2, that's a little bit longer, but it's still very close, or fairly close to the gym. Okay, coaches, if you're attending this event as a coach, as a certified USA Climbing coach, you have to register for the event through Sport 80. And you have to make sure your waiver is complete in advance. Otherwise, you're going to be spending that extra, your first 15, 20 minutes doing the waivers. We're only going to be allowing L1 or L2 coaches in the event as coaches. So make sure you get your certification in order. If you don't have one of these, you're going to be going in the facility as a spectator. For Sunday, only L2 coaches are allowed in ISO. If you're planning on going in ISO and your L2 is not completed yet or hasn't been approved, highly recommend that you get on that case with USA Climbing to get that through as quickly as possible. Similar to ISO isolation, we're not going to be making any exceptions here. If you don't have a certified L2 membership, coach membership by that point, you will not be allowed into ISO as a coach. Now, I want to remind all the coaches during both days, if you have a problem with some of the scrolls being given to your athletes or whatever, please do not communicate with the route judges. We want our judges to focus on our athletes. If you have a question, you grab one of the HJOs and we will help you as much as we can. If you can't find us, grab one of the RCs and they'll know where we are and we'll be able to help you. Spectators, similar to athletes and coaches, waivers are required for spectators. So highly recommend you get those done early rather than spending your first 20 minutes in front of an iPad there trying to complete a spectator or a waiver. The spectator cost is $10 per person. However, each athlete gets a +1 wristband. So what that means is that if you're a parent and you're there with your athlete, you're going to have a wristband that's going to get you into the venue without that paying that $10. If you have anybody that's in addition to yourself, so you have more than one spectator, then the second person has to pay the $10. As I mentioned before, bibs are the spectator tickets for our athletes for both days, so make sure you don't lose those. Um, just some quick tips for spectators. I think our seasoned parents or spectators know these tips, but for anybody who's new to one of these championship events, we want to remind you guys to be careful with beta. So don't give advice to athletes during their attempts. Don't talk to the route judges. Let them do their thing. If you see an issue or you think you see an issue, let one of the HJOs know, and we'll take it from there. Um, for Sunday only, no communication with the athletes at all until they're done their climb. So as they come out, they get ready to the climb, don't try to have conversation with them to let them know how everybody else did before them, or none of that. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. If you have any questions regarding judging, the belaying, the scoring, or how the event works, grab one of the HJOs. More than happy to help you with the rules part. If you just have like a general question in terms of how the event works and the flow, and RC can help you. But if there's something that they can't give you information on, they'll grab one of the HJOs to help you. Of course, we encourage everybody to cheer for your athlete and as well as your athlete's friends. We always want to see people being encouraged, being cheered on. That always feels good as an athlete, I'm sure, and it's going to motivate them to give their very, very best and leave it all on the wall. All volunteers, let me just start by saying thank you very, very much for everybody who signed up really quickly. I was very, very moved to see our judges and assistant judges slots fill so quickly. It's very rare that this happens. So I'm very, very grateful for all of you. However, there are some things we need to make sure that our volunteers have completed before the event. Waivers, of course, make sure your waivers are done in advance. Enter through the front entrance and check in at the front desk. For judges, as you check in, Hannah, our volunteer coordinator, she'll be there and she'll direct you where to go. We're going to have a judges meeting under the main wall there. So we're going to want you to go grab your coffee that we're going to have for volunteers and a bagel, and right away go close to the main wall so that we can start that judges meeting as quickly as possible. If you have one of those USA Climbing judge shirts, official judge shirts, please bring it with you. We're hoping you could wear it. We want to make this event not only run smoothly, but also look professional and feel professional. And I'm going to repeat this again. Hannah, who's a wonderful volunteer coordinator, will help all our volunteers get to where they need to be. So if you're helping with ISO on Sunday, Hannah will make sure you get to Matt and Pete in time. If you're a judge, she'll make sure you get to where you're supposed to be in terms of where the judges meeting is going to be. Or if you're doing something else, she'll make sure that you talk to the right person for your assigned role. So let's start the technical briefing for our athletes and coaches. So at any point, athletes, if you have a question about your climb before you start climbing, or you're on the wall, you want to ask something about a climb, you can ask the judges. They'll answer your question as best they can without, of course, giving you beta or information that you're not supposed to be having. The one thing I do want to mention here is when you get to the top, we will not be giving that thumbs up like we do in bouldering. That's something that we don't do for lead and top rope. So if you're lead climber, you get to the top, make sure you clip that last straw, because once you clip the last straw, you've considered that as if you've topped that climb. That counts as a top. As a top rope climber, make sure you control that last hold. Once you control it, it counts as a top. Okay, the judges will not give you a thumbs up. So make sure you're comfortable with the control. Once you're done with your attempt, you go to the main judge who has the device. They'll show you your score on the device. Please make sure you look at your score after your attempt. Okay, so that's your responsibility to do that. We will not come after you. So once you get off the wall, you take your rope off or you unhook as a top climber, you just run off. We're not going to come after you to show you. We're going to be there. We're going to try our best reasonably to show you your score. But if you just walk away, then that's that. And I say this because we're trying to avoid instances where people think they got one score, they don't check the scoring module, and then the appeal deadline passes, and then they realize, oh my God, this is not what I thought I got. I should have checked. Once the appeal deadline passes, it's too late to change anything. So we're asking you guys to make sure you look at your scores before you leave your climb. Beta on Saturday, of course, no beta while somebody's on the wall. That shouldn't be new for anybody. On Sunday, no beta communication between competitors, our coaches, parents, or spectators. So once our athletes come out, they're in the competition area. We don't want to give them beta. We want to cheer for them. We want to encourage them, but we don't want to tell them what to do on the wall. They have to solve their puzzle on their own. The top 6 in each category after finals will get an invitation to nationals. This, of course, doesn't take into account any extra advancements. So if those are around extra advancement, that is going to be something that you're going to see in the scoring module, where you'll see the people who qualify for nationals have a star beside their name. So if there's more than 6, you'll see 7 or 8 people with the stars. And then we'll have awards at the end of climbing on Sunday, once all the appeal deadlines have passed. Additional information for athletes. So you know that we mentioned you're going to have 6 minutes. So that 6 minutes will start once you leave the ground and you go the route. We're going to start the timer. If you're on the wall at the end of that 6 minutes, we're going to call you off and give you highest scored hold. Otherwise, if your attempt ends before the 6 minutes, you'll get whatever your score is. This should be any surprise to people. Sometimes we use red and black tape where it's necessary. We're going to avoid that as much as we can. And as a matter of fact, we don't anticipate any red and black tape in this event. But if we do, we're going to be mentioning that in a technical briefing on Saturday morning or Saturday before each session. Of course, chin-up holes on the wall instructions are off. Clips have to be clipped in proper sequence, so you can't skip a clip. If you do a Z clip, you have to fix it. If you skip a draw, we're going to ask you to clip in the next draw, be safe as soon as possible, and then we're going to lower you, and you're going to get the highest scored before you skip that draw. Okay. There's a bunch of bolts on the walls here. We'll do our best. Instead do their best to set the route so that those bolts don't interfere with the climbers. So as you're climbing, watch out for those. But if you weight one of those bolts, if you stand on one of those bolts and put weight on it, that results in a termination of your attempt. Okay, let's talk about scoring really quickly. Two main concepts here, really. There's control and there's use. And the control is where you've used an object or structure to achieve or change a stable body position. So this gives you the score of that hold. So if a hold is a number, for example, 32, controlling the hold will give you that score of 32. However, we also have the use concept. So this means this is where you've used that hold that you've controlled already to try to progress to the next sequential hold. So if you've made use of that object to make both a progressive movement of the center of mass or hips and a progressive movement of either or both hands toward the next sequential hold along the line progression. So I'm on hold number 10. I'm trying to go to hold 11, and I make an effort. My hips is going towards hold 11. My hands, both hands are going towards that hold, but I don't get there. I fall. That's a plus. The other instance is if you make that a similar attempt towards a handhold that's further along the line of progression. So instead of going from 10 to 11, you're going to go to 10 to 12. And that particular movement has been successfully controlled by another competitor in that same category, in that same session, previously or later on. Okay. So if now I'm trying to go from 10 to 12 and I fall, I'm going to get the plus only if that move has actually been established by somebody either before me or after me. That will result in the plus that you'll see in your score So you'll see scores, you'll see numbers, and some numbers will have a plus next to it. So that's what the plus means. It's that use. Now let's talk about appeals and technicals. You know, for appeals, there's really two kinds of appeals. The first one is the straightforward one that we see a lot, where it's relating to scoring or ranking of a competitor. That has to be made in writing. It can be verbally initiated, but it has to be made in writing uh, before the appeal deadline. Now, what that usually means is you're appealing a score and you want something high. Generally, people will appeal something if they want a higher score. This kind of appeals, and that's what they're looking for. The second type of appeal is one that's relating to a termination of a competitor's attempt. So somebody's climbing, their attempt was terminated by the judges because of some infraction they're thought to have committed. And so you guys want to appeal that to make sure because you don't agree with it and you want the athlete wants to get another attempt on that route. That appeal has to be made before the next climber climbs that route. So as coaches, I highly recommend you have some appeal forms that you can print from USA Climbing website. Have them kind of pre-filled with the climbers' names if that helps, but make sure you're also familiar with the rule book so that you can quickly appeal that. You can quickly appeal that. In that instance, you can also verbally initiate it while you're completing the form. So I highly recommend that. So asking the coaches to be on top of their game here, earn their money, make sure they're ready if that's what they want to do. I also just want to mention that the appeals have to be submitted by certified coaches or the athletes. Now, we have some athletes who are minors, and some may not have their coaches at this event, those minors. So the parents can help them fill that form, and they can accompany them as the athlete submits the appeal. They don't have to go there by themselves. You can accompany them, but it's the athlete who has to do the work with the HJO. Now let's talk about technicals. The outcome here that you're looking for is another attempt on that route, and these must be called immediately. You cannot call it a technical 30 minutes after it's happened, and you say, well, 30 minutes ago this happened, I want to call it technical. That's too late. It's got to be immediate. And this might mean, as a climber or an athlete, you're on the wall and you're calling it technical. Something you saw blood on hold as you're climbing, a spinner, so a hold spins, a hold breaks off, something like that. You got to call it immediately if you want to call it technical and get another attempt. So in some instances, you could still be hanging onto the wall and you decide, you know what, I'm going to keep on climbing. If you do that, you forego the technical. You can no longer call that technical after the fact. You can't try to go to the top and then call it technical. It has to be immediate. And the way you do that is you tell the route judge, oh, I have a spinner here. I'm going to call it technical. The route judge will pause your time. They'll pause the scoring at that point, and they'll get one of the HJOs to come and we'll handle that situation. Okay. Coaches, if you want to call it technical, you got to get an HJO. We're asking you not to talk to the route judges because we want our judges to focus on our athletes. Okay. I can't stress this enough. If we catch coaches talking or bothering our judges, we're going to intervene. We're going to be giving verbal warnings and yellow cards if needed, because we really want our judges to focus on our athletes on the wall. So in terms of cost for the appeals for this event is the $100 for each appeal. If I go back a slide and I look at the two types of appeal, the second type, which is relating to the termination of a competitor's attempt that must be made before the next competitor, there's no cost for that appeal. The appeal fee will apply for an appeal that's relating to the scoring or ranking of a competitor. So that's $100 and should be made through Sport 80. And then you have to show the JP when you submit the appeal, the receipt from Sport 80 for that appeal. And we highly recommend putting the receipt number on the appeal form. That's going to help with the refund if that happens later on. Talking about refunds, let's talk about the appeal outcomes. There's really 3 appeal outcomes. 1, the appeal is successful. So your appeal is going to be refunded to you. And then the original decision made by the route judge, it's going to be changed by the appeals jury. So this means you've won that appeal. The second outcome is it's unsuccessful. So the appeal fee that was paid, that goes to USA Climbing. The original decision made by the root judge stands, and things are where they are. The third is undetermined. In this instance, the appeal fee is refunded. However, the original decision made by the root judge stands. Okay. Now, an appeal is undetermined if the available evidence is inconclusive. So we can't determine the outcome given the evidence that we have, the videos and all that. Or if the appeal jury is unable to reach a unanimous verdict. So the appeal juries don't agree on what the outcome should be. That results in an undetermined appeal. We're going to have official video in this event. So we're going to make sure we put a video strategically so we can see climbs from multiple angles, and hopefully that's not going to result in inconclusive evidence. We've reached the end of our meeting, so I want to thank everybody. We still have, I think, a few slots, 1 or 2 slots of rope wranglers that we need for events. So please sign up if you can. If you have any questions, email us, Region 32 USA Climbing. If you see your C's there, just make sure you say hi. These people, I know for a fact, put in a lot of work and time out of their daily lives to make these events successful for your kids. So please, a quick hello and chat with them would be appreciated. Thank you very much, and see you all Saturday.